Thousands of years ago, people began with visual illustrations and songs to both entertain, teach, and express themselves. As our technology has evolved, we've been able to share our art in more immersive ways, offering new perspectives on what could be done. With the invention of cameras came films, which would later incorporate sound as well as imagery to tell a story or message. Film is now commonplace in modern societies and now has a mass appeal to people all around the world. In the 60s and 70s, computer programmers began experimenting with the different ways computers could be used to make games. A much more emergent art form, video games nowadays have the core elements that a film does, visuals and audio, with the key element of choice. The aspect of one's influence in the story or world is totally unique to video games and allows artists to tailor an experience around their audience. Some people create things as a means of self-expression or to satisfy their own needs, but in the case of video games specifically, an audience is completely necessary. Due to the fact that a video game is intended to be experienced from the perspective of a player, this means that there actually has to be players to begin with. Thus, keeping an audience captivated is one of the core aspects of designing a video game. Many people tend to associate the word game with fun. And while having a heated discussion about Super Mario Sunshine with one of my friends, I stated that one of the factors that drew me to the game was how fun it was. I added that being fun is not a necessary component to making a game interesting, however. He contested that thought, and it provoked yet another argument. Coming out of it, I became interested in exploring the concept further, not for vindication, but rather because I began questioning my own beliefs. What led me to believe that fun was not a necessary factor in making a video game captivating? Today, I want to delve into why people play video games, whether they have to be fun, and what defines fun. Many people have different biases and tend to be inclined towards things they already know they favor. This principle can be seen in effect in many places. Consumers will be targeted based on their profiles. Hollywood films are often made to follow specific genres to captivate a specific audience. That way, they can ensure that their target audience always comes back to buy a ticket. Obviously, this can have its detriments. However, this practice is applied somewhat differently in the sphere of video games. Video game genres are much different from those of films, books, or music. Why? Because the experience between two genres of video game is often vastly different. The experience of watching a movie is always the same. You sit down, absorb the story, visuals, and sounds the film is giving you, and you process that information. With a video game, it requires a response, and each individual person obviously has different capabilities. This is a crucial detail when factoring in a single demographic's taste, because one's taste in a video game genre is a demographic in itself and is influenced by a person's decision-making and personality type. However, Jason Vandenberg, a game designer at ArenaNet, argues that appeal and motivation are separate. This means that, like in other mediums, a video game genre really only matters for the factor of appeal, and the actual motivating factors to play a game are separate and are rooted in the self-determination theory. So, while the individual facets of a game have a unique appeal, they employ universal tactics to keep people engaged. Self-determination theory encompasses three fundamental needs: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Competence involves proving yourself of your capabilities and the ability to overcome challenge. This is the aspect of challenge in game design. Many games approach the aspect of challenge differently, and it is certainly a difficult aspect to master. In order for challenge to be best executed, game designers will try to make the increase in difficulty multifaceted and aim to teach players new skills through experience rather than explanation. Otherwise, a game might be criticized for having artificial difficulty, if the way in which a difficulty is scaled is simply through the sheer amount of one task having to be completed. Autonomy involves feeling in control of the situation. As previously mentioned, every action you make in a video game is a choice, and choices are rewarded through feeling the gravity of the choice. You feel more accomplished in overcoming a challenge if the reason you initially failed was due to your own incompetence rather than the game's fault. If you are able to witness the reaction of your own decisions, then you'll feel more immersed with the world and its situations. Lastly, relatedness is the need to feel connected and have a sense of belonging. This can be elaborated into a sense of immersion, even in a game world of isolation. If you are able to find something within that isolation, an oasis per se, it will resonate with you and make it easier to be identifiable. This is the same exact reason why certain people tend to play the same game for a long period of time. They associate with being the player of that specific game, and they may find a relatedness of being able to understand certain characters and scenarios. That's why you see so many people cosplaying as a titular video game character when you go to a convention. Each of these three psychological needs are employed in any video game to some degree, and are employed differently within different contexts. However, without involving these three needs, a video game will fail to be captivating and have less of an appeal. The degree to which each need can be examined is through extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. The effect of a motivation is much greater when it comes from within, and thus it would be ideal to make a game with exclusively intrinsic motivations, right? Well, the issue lies within the player themselves. Yes, you could technically have a game that includes only intrinsic motivations, and a certain type of player may be captivated by that style of gameplay. Take, for example, someone who finds an interest in the sandbox capabilities of Minecraft. However, not every player will have a strong sense of self-motivation. There often has to be some kind of carrot or a stick motivating a player forward in order to have a broad appeal. Heck, even those strong-willed Minecraft builders eventually face burnout, which is why the developers constantly add new content updates and other members of the community keep making new discoveries. Those exist as extrinsic motivations for those types of players, but even for the player who has no interest in building, there lie other goals within the game of Minecraft. The most obvious one being the quest of survival mode. The challenge of beating the Ender Dragon and obtaining powerful gear. This is a type of extrinsic motivation that exists to appeal to a broad audience. Now, that being said, extrinsic motivations aren't bad. They are simply more temporary than intrinsic motivations. Once you complete a goal that has been set out for you, the goal has been completed. That can lead players to eventually move on to something else. Plenty of games offer options for players to mess around once they've completed the main story of the game, because there are often parts of a game world that a player might want to fully experience before moving on. This exists as an intrinsic motivating factor that will lead to a long-lasting memory of the game. The balance between motivations is complex, but the mastery of it is key to making a game interesting. Now, this begs the question, how does fun relate to the aforementioned needs and motivations? The Oxford Dictionary defines fun as being something that brings amusement. The term of fun is difficult to pin down in terms of absolute meaning, but may rather refer to one's fixation on an activity. Without going into more complicated reasons, such as guilt or obligation, it can be said that we don't tend to do things we don't enjoy. The act of doing something fun is doing so for the sake of our own will and enjoyment in the activity. Let's take a deeper look into the word game itself. To make something a game, you gamify it. Gamification is the act of making a task more enjoyable by making a game out of it. There are extrinsic methods of gamification, like points cards, and there are intrinsic methods of gamification, such as catering a task to one's enjoyment. Gamification is a principle that has been explored and applied in all kinds of facets of life: school, workplaces, even consumerism. A video game is simply taking the concept of gamification and expressing art through those methods. Some people are able to find solace in an activity as trivial as picking up trash. As unappealing and disgusting of a job it is, it's possible to come to terms with a job and make it as more of an escape from what you've been doing. Thus, is it really that different from going around a maze eating dots? I didn't expect to come to a verdict, and rather intended to be left with a sense of bewilderment. And while the definition of the word fun itself has yet to be concretely defined, I think I can say that when we play games intrinsically, it is a form of enjoyment and thus fun. If you play a video game for an extrinsic reason and it brings no enjoyment, then no, I would not constitute that as being fun. Yet, even trivial or downright frightening experiences can be regarded as fun. So to that, I say, you're right, Aziz. I was wrong.